everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. That is a mouthful, but I love saying it, so thank you for sitting through it every time I say that. SIMS is a research and development group in the Kislak Center focused on manuscript studies. We do a lot of digital projects. We digitize all our manuscripts, so when you follow the link to MS Codex 107, you will find a digital copy there on the left. And we also do other kinds of projects, and we have manuscripts in our collection, and I like to show them to people. And so Coffee with a Codex is our weekly, informal, on Zoom, 30-minute show and tell. So if you've been here before, you know the drill, and you are welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. It's great to have you here. If you have questions as I go, put them in the chat, and I will keep my eye on them. Also, my colleague Amy Hutchins is here. Amy is our manuscripts cataloging librarian, and she knows these manuscripts very well, and she can answer questions too. So together, we will keep this going. So MS Codex 107, this is so neat. This is such a challenging manuscript in so many ways. So the first thing that you're probably going to notice, you've probably been looking at it as I've been talking, it doesn't have a binding, so it is disbound, which if you have ever heard me talk any before, you know that I am fascinated with the structure of books. So this one is really great to actually be able to see how these books are put together. I need to be a little careful with it because not only does it not have a binding, an actual binding cover, you can see the threads here. It's coming unthreaded, so the quires, some of them are not actually attached to each other. So I'm going to be pretty careful with this, but I'm going to show you, we're going to page through. This is actually one of the fun things about doing this on video, is if you look at the digitized copy, you don't really get a sense of like how disjunct it is, how it moves. You're going to see that when I start like moving it around. It's pretty neat. So books, manuscripts are made by taking sheets of parchment or paper. This is parchment, right? So it's made of animal skin, and sort of stacking them, stacks of 3 or 4. I think most of these would be stacks of 4 layers of parchment, and then they're folded over to make a little booklet that are called quires or gatherings. I call them quires. And then they're sewn together, and you can't usually see that, but here you can see it. You can see that here's a stack, and here's a stack, and here's a stack. So here are the quires. You can see how there were holes. So there's holes here that the sewing would go through, and through here and here. And this is actually where the binding would have been attached. So there would have been part of the spine. I mean, this is the spine, and there would have been covers on it at some point, and it's gone. So that's pretty neat. You can see something that you don't usually get to see. Another thing that is interesting about this manuscript is its history. So this, it's a cartulary. Let me tell you a little bit about it first. So it's a cartulary from the 13th century, the sort of last part of the 13th century. I believe the latest document here is dated 1253, maybe later, later, either 12, I saw a couple of different dates as I was kind of going through. I'm going to see what does the record say in terms of date. 1256, so this is the latest document is dated January 9th, 1256. The earliest document is dated, the earliest, I have 2 numbers. The earliest document is from 958, and the earliest dated document is 1042. I'm not sure what that distinction is. I think maybe one of them has a date attached and the other one, historians figured out what the date was. I'm not sure. But anyway, very early. However, the whole book was written after 1253. So this is not like they took a bunch of older material and bound it together. Someone took the old documents and copied them into a book towards the end of the 13th century. And they did this as a kind of record keeping, right? You can imagine that this was a monastery, and they would have had probably a room with piles of documents in it. And these are important documents. The documents that are included here include royal endowments, so endowments from the crown, donations from individuals, agreements of exchange. There are inheritances. There are people saying, I am going to die and I will leave you my books. Let's see if we can find that one. I was actually looking at that one earlier. Here we go. So here's one where this individual is, among other things, he leaves some land to the monastery. That's nice, because then the monastery has land that they can lease out and make money off of. But he also leaves libros here, his library. There's a psalter, a hymnal, and I think that's an antiphonary, right? So this person is leaving these books. So these would have gone into the monastery library. So this is important documents to have, and having them all in a, stacked up in a on the shelves in a room is probably not the best thing. So what they would do is they would copy them into these cartularies, and then there's a record of all of these documents that the monastery can keep. But also it's great for historians, because now historians have a really amazing sense of what was happening in this monastery at, between, 1024 and 1256, right? So that's a lot of great information. Now, the monastery is San Andreas de Fanlo in Aragon, Spain. So that's northern Spain. However, when Penn purchased this manuscript do we have our information of when we got it? Purchased on the Lessing and Edith Rosenthal Fund, but I don't see a date. It was, I don't know, it was a while ago. It's 107, so it's pretty early, maybe the 50s, 1950s. It was believed to be, or at least the early documentation that we have, says it's the Cartulary of the Benedictine Abbey of Monte Aragon, which is not the monastery of San Andreas de Fanlo. It's different. They're about 95 kilometers apart. And it was believed to be unknown, that this was an unknown cartulary. More recent work has been done, particularly by Eric, I want to get his name right, is it Knapp? Who wrote a book about the manuscript. Eric Knibbs, Knibbs. If you look at the record, there's a citation to a book that he wrote about this cartulary there. This was, in fact, a known cartulary. It was known as the Cartulary of the Monastery of San Andreas de Fanlo. It was studied in, did I write this down? 1936. It was present in Fanlo in 1936. And when the same person who saw it in 1936 went back in 1940 to look for it, it was not there. It was missing. And that was during the Spanish Civil War is when it went missing. So it's not clear. I don't know if it's clear to anyone exactly what happened to it, but it was taken and sold as something that it wasn't. And the manuscript as we have it bears physical marks of this sort of an attempt basically to hide its identity. Like you put on a funny mustache and a hat and you're like, I'm someone else. what was done, a few things that were done. One is that there was another leaf here. You can see that there's the stub. This leaf was cut out. The folio numbers up in the right-hand corner have been, the second part of the numbers have been erased. So this is actually folio 10. And then if we turn this over, this is folio, this was 11, and you can see it's 1. It looks like it's 1, 1, and then 2, because 12 has been erased. And if we keep going, eventually we'll get to 20, and now it's just 0, and then we start over with 1. And the reason that they did this, they cut because the previous leaf was the original leaf 9, so it had a 9 number. So if there was this manuscript that people knew that started with leaf 9, and so they removed it, and like now it starts with 1. So the fact that it started with 9 means that there was a choir that was in front of this that's now missing. This is another thing that's interesting about this manuscript, particularly to me, is that part of it's missing, and also a lot of it has been misbound. We're going to go in and look a little more. We're going to look more at the inside. It's just the historical context sort of takes a lot to explain, and I want to explain it all. Another thing that changed is that there used to be a label, some kind of identifying label here, and that was removed as well. So on the original manuscript, there would have been this label. So they took it off, so now you can't identify it by the label, but you can identify it sort of, because there's no label. There used to be one on page 10, and now there isn't. Okay. That's great. So let's keep going. So I showed you the one with the books. That was sort of fun. Let's see. It is not a heavily decorated manuscript, except it's got these beautiful initials. I think they're nice. They're red. They have the sort of decoration around them. There serves as a navigational help, but it's also a little pretty, so that's nice. Sorry, I have to hold it up this way because otherwise I don't want it to fall apart in my hands. This is the kind of thing you miss in the digital images. You can't see it as well here, but I think it's interesting to see sort of how they move. Let's see. I'm going to go through. We're going to look some more at the structural elements. So here is the end of a choir, and many of the choirs in this manuscript have catchwords. Let's see if this one has a catchword. That one. So here's a catchword here, all the way down at the bottom, and it doesn't match the first word at the top. So the way a catchword works, these are to help with when you're binding. So at the end of a choir, you put the scribe, not you or me, the scribe would write the first word of the next choir. And then the binder knows that that's to put them together like that. So this is Domine, I think, D-O-N-E with a macron over the O. But then when we get to the top, that's ad. I'm not sure what that abbreviation is. But it's definitely not dominum. So this has been misbound at some point. And it was misbound at some point that was pretty early, because the numbering at the top, which according to the record I looked at is 16th century, so it would have been misbound before the 16th century, because this numbering goes all the way through. We have new numbering down at the bottom on the right-hand corner in pencil, and those are the numbers that I'll refer to. Let me see. I see there's stuff happening in the chat. Ad sanctum. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. All right. Yes, Leslie asks, what text is in red ink? So yeah, so these are copies of what would have originally have been separate documents. Things like, wills and gifts and all sorts of things to the monastery. And so the red letters and the red writing is going to be indicating the start of a new document. So every time another document was copied, they indicated that by a red initial and a little note in red, just to say, like, here's what the next document is going to be. And I don't actually know I think from things I've read and as I was doing my little bit of research, I think these are not in any, well, they're definitely not in order by date. They're not in temporal order. There has been work done to list out what all of these documents are, and the numbering for those documents is in order by date. So the earliest one is number 1 in that ordering, but it's not number 1 in this document. There may be some other kind of ordering, but I don't know what it is. So Amy made a note about flesh, the flesh side facing hair side. So we're seeing this here. And this is one of the things that another way that we can tell that there's something going on. There's no catchword here. And also you probably can notice that the page on the left is very yellow compared to the page on the right. And that's because this is the hair side of the parchment, which means it used to be on the outside of the animal. And this is the flesh side, which was the inside of the animal. And there's this rule in Western medieval manuscripts that hair faces hair and flesh faces flesh. And if you see hair facing flesh, something odd is going on. And in this particular manuscript, you see it happens here too at the start of this quire. And it is because, let's take a look. So here is, how many leaves does this have? 1, 2, 3, and now we're in the middle because there's thread here, and then 4, 5, 6. So this one has 6 leaves, which means that there are 3 sheets that were folded. There would have originally been 4 sheets that were folded. Most of the other ones in here, except for one other one that has the same situation. So what this means is that the outer sheet was actually taken out at some point before the 16th century, right? Because the numbering goes all the way through. There are also just places where it's been completely misbound. That is, the quires are just out of order. And I won't go into it here. If you're curious, it is described in the record in some detail. So this is not actually how the manuscript originally was put together, and not only because of the recent changes that were made because someone was trying to hide its identity. The changes are much, much older than that. So I'm just paging through, and I'm looking at the bottom edge of the page here. So because this is a cartulary, it's not like a Bible, it's not a fancy book. This was a working book, which means that they weren't precious about the parchment that they were using to do it. So if you're into parchment, which I hope you will be or are, so one of the things is that the hair and flesh side is you can really tell the difference between them. In fine parchment, sometimes you can't tell which side is hair and which side is flesh just because it's so well made. This is also, I call this kind of parchment really crunchy. You probably can't hear it, but it's making a lot of noise here. And also you get the edge you get the edges of the skin. So when parchment's made, they would take the whole animal skin and tie it to a frame and stretch it, and the edges get all stretchy and kind of curved. And usually those are trimmed off. Like in a fine book of hours, you're not going to see this. But here it's fine. It doesn't affect the where you're going to write the text. So we'll do that. Here's another example of a little bit of a curve there where the skin was stretched. So one of the things that we know from these documents about the monastery at Fanlo is that the land, they depended a lot on vineyards for their money. So they had vineyards, and then people would work the vineyards, and then they would get the money from the wine that was made there. And but at least some of the people who were doing the work in the vineyards were Jewish. So this is Spain in the sort of 11th through the 13th century. This was a time when there would have been Jewish people and also Muslim people in Spain, but the leadership was Christian. So it was sort of an interesting situation. And I've seen, as I've been paging through, some stars written in. There's some in the record I was looking at, an older record. It says Stars of David, indicating when there are Jewish names. I haven't seen Stars of David, but I have seen just a star. Let me go back to see. I think it was here. And I'm also noticing something in the margin. Here we go. So here's a star there, and I've seen it at least one other place. So for people working on the history of Jews in Spain at this time, this might be an interesting thing to look at. Also, this was clearly used post Middle Ages, because we have these later, I'm seeing a lot actually in the margin, these later notes, in addition to the page numbering itself. All right, Lynn has a good question. She asks, is there any practical reason why the text isn't written right the way down on the folios, that there are these big margins? I don't actually know. Sometimes it's really clear why they're not writing on the whole in the whole manuscript. Sometimes it's clear that there's been space left for people to make notes. People are leaving notes in the margins here. Maybe the scribe expected that there would be people coming in later and adding notes. I don't know. Amy, do you have any insight into that? No? It's a mystery. I don't know. So much of what, sometimes you can say, oh, I think I know what these folks were doing, and sometimes it's just, I don't know, it's a mystery. It could be, I'm not really familiar with cartularies. It could be that this is how you did cartularies, and so they didn't really think about it. Mathilde suggests room for updates. Could be. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm going to be looking to see if there's anything in the bottom margin. I've mostly been seeing notes in the side margins, but not in the top margins. I am noticing, I always point these out because I think this is fun, is prick marks on the edges. So these are the marks that whoever was preparing the parchment would use to make straight lines across. So that's how they keep the text straight, is by the use of these prick marks. Leslie suggests the canon that determined the text space proportionate to the page size always left specific margins. So that makes sense. So basically then the size of the margin is dependent on the size of the text. So maybe if the text was smaller, the margins would also be smaller. Leslie, am I understanding that correctly? Amy is also pointing out the pricking on the edges means the manuscript hasn't been trimmed down much, but the top might have been trimmed, which would make the bottom look bigger. Yeah, so if the top had been cut off, then it would look bigger. There, let's see. Braun, leaving more space at the bottom than top is a really common book layout, especially in Western books. I've seen some scholars suggest that it helps you not get your fingers into the ink when you hold it. Oh, yeah, that's a practical thing. So here's another marginal note. This one even looks like it's got crayon. 1264, 1268. So someone was interested in the dates here. Yeah. Another thing that is it's not mentioned in our record, but it's in some of the notes in the little archival document that Amy keeps in a box behind her. You can see it behind her there, all of those boxes full of secret information about the manuscripts that don't make it into the records. This apparently includes some book curses. Let me see if I can find it. I thought that was pretty fun. This says, one of the reasons for this book's preservation may well have been the recurrent use of the strong book curse, quisquis voluit istum supra scriptum disrumpere illis Deus sicut maledixit Datan et Abiron et Sodoma et Gomorrah. If you don't know Latin, that says, whoever would like to tear up the above written, God may accurse him as he did to Datan and Abiron and Sodom and Gomorrah. I haven't found it, but I think that's pretty neat if true. Leslie says the side margin is 1.5 times the top and the bottom is twice the top. Yeah, so that's probably twice the top. So let's see. Braun says, also you'll notice the text block is closer to the margin than the outer edge. Yes, which is typical. A lot of modern books continue similar proportions. Cheryl says, bad news for whoever removed that binding, referring to the curse. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Who removed the binding? Who, changed the folio numbering? But we still have the book, which is kind of fun. Even though it's been kind of damaged quite a bit. All right, so we have 1 more minute. I'm going to keep kind of paging through here. There has been, if you're interested more in the content, we didn't talk about the content a huge amount. I recommend you get a look at the book that's cited in the record. Because that will have, it's actually pretty rare that there's a whole book that's been written about one of our manuscripts. So I recommend that you do that. There's another star there. And take a look. And of course, it's been digitized. You can have a look at your house anytime you want. And I'm pleased to note, to close, that here is a catchword. Oop. That matches the next choir. So here's one place at least where where it's been bound together correctly. All right. So I'm going to close now. Thank you so much for coming today. I had a lot of fun showing this off. Someone said thanks for the construction details. This is what I love. I could just talk about the structure of books all the time. So thank you for humoring me and being here. And we'll be back next week. So I hope to see you then. Bye.